I am the general manager. I've been the general manager now for almost 24 years.
I am a council member. I've been on council for probably over 20 years, different times, take a year off here and there, but over 20 years I've been a council member.
I started at Wind River when I was 15 years old in 1994, and I worked here 7 years. Then I left and go to school. Then I came back as the hotel manager, and now I'm the director of gaming.
So I'm the director of technical services at Wind River, and I've been in this role for, going on 7 years now. This role encompasses managing the facilities department, the housekeeping department, and the information technology department and capital budgets. So as far as this topic goes, I've had a lot of interaction with the non-smoking and smoking from the casino floor because all three of those areas are impacted pretty big by smoking.
My name is Violet Trinity. I am a tribal member. I work for Wind River, but I work in the government building at the Rancheria. And I do public relations. I'm the public relations supervisor at the present moment.
I have been here for 13 years, and I'm the marketing manager, and I've been in that position since 2010.
I was in the casino at that time because I was the hotel manager, and I seen the full effects of what happened during that time frame of the non-smoking policy. It was drastic. From our revenue, everything completely dropped. The people coming in changed. We were smoking. I mean, that's one thing we have in California that nothing else, no other place has, is smoking and gambling and alcohol and stuff like that. And so it was a real culture shock to the guests that were coming in.
Yes, as a team member, I'm here every day, and I actually spent more time on the floor when it was non-smoking. I didn't have to plan my schedule around visiting the floor. If I had a meeting, I didn't want to smell like cigarettes, and I spent a lot more time on the floor than in the past.
I happened to come over to the casino. We had, somebody had a birthday party over here, and we came over the night before they went to non-smoking, and being an ex-smoker, the smoke was very bad. And then we had another meeting over here the next day and come over, and it was like 100% difference, just within 8 to 10 hours. And then now, after all the new equipment has been put in, I can't even tell that there is smoke with the changes that have been made.
I don't know, the way I seen it was when you have people with habits, they tend to have a lot more spending power. They spend more money and stuff like that. When there's people that don't have those kind of habits, like smoking and stuff like that, they come in, they enjoy the time, but they're not spending as much money, and that was just my perspective of the situation.
Well, I did get a lot of positive comments about the lack of the cigarette smell or the decrease of the cigarette smell. Still, obviously, didn't go completely away because it's hard to get that out of a building once it's in. Yeah, I'd say overwhelmingly I had positive feedback from customers, other than the few that were mad because they were smokers and they felt like they weren't being treated as customers again. You know, that's a tough one.
Some of the patrons loved it, especially our restaurant guests, and others disliked it. So it was kind of a toss-up in between. I mean, there was those who were super happy and those who were very sad. And so it just depends on if you were a smoker or non-smoker. But For myself, I thought it was good that we went to non-smoking because I could tell, I could say just the air quality itself inside made a big difference. So I was a little sad when we had to go back, but it was a financial situation.
Well, I talked to a lot of the staff, and the staff loved it. I mean, they truly loved it because it's on a Saturday night here. It's pretty smoky and it's pretty bad, you know. And some guests were upset because they couldn't smoke, and other guests were happy that there was no smoke. So it's like a balancing act between the both. But all in all, the team members completely enjoyed it.
Overwhelmingly, the non-smokers, of course, were very supportive of it. The non-smoking patrons are a relatively small percentage of, I shouldn't say a small percentage, but they're a large percentage of the revenue generated on the casino floor, and they were the ones that felt the impact the most. And when I was speaking to them, that was their biggest problem with it, was the fact that they felt they weren't being treated quite like the customer they used to be, so they had other options in the local geographic area where they could go and get that treatment. And so it's, once again, I got a lot of positive, but the people that actually come in here and use our facility the most and to the best effect are the ones that seem to be most negatively impacted from it at the beginning.
A lot of the people that I know smoked, and they were mad. They were upset. They started going to different casinos, different things like that, and the non-smokers, they were happy about it. They enjoyed it.
I talked to some of our hosted players. They really seemed to enjoy it going non-smoking. Our staff did too. I actually talked to a table games dealer that she suffers from asthma, and she really enjoyed it. She liked it a lot. I remember the employees seemed happier. They really did. The reason I remember her too is that she was having an episode in the stairway on her break once, and I asked if she was okay, and she just said she had a cold and her asthma flares up during that time, and I got her some water. I just remember speaking to her. That was prior to us going non-smoking, and then after we went non-smoking, I remember she thanked me a lot for that day of the incident, and then I remember her she just seemed happier because of her health issues prior to working here.
Overall, the feedback was positive, but it was also somewhat neutral and positive. So it's hard to explain when I say that. But what happened was, not only was our revenues declining over time and not supporting what we needed them to with the new hotel that we had built, but the employees' tips that they were receiving were declining as well. And what people don't understand is that's what they live off of, is the tips. And we have a lot of tipped employees. And so the feedback was, of course, they enjoyed not being in the smoking environment, but their revenues were declining, and that affected their livelihood. So they were happy to get their revenue back when we went back to smoking, but they weren't necessarily happy with being back in the smoke environment.
We had some members who disliked it, and we had other members who did like it, and it just depends if you were a smoker or non-smoker. And it had nothing to do with finance. Just some liked it because their friends who don't smoke enjoyed the casino more and the restaurants, and the other parties wanted to smoke. And that's just a choice that they make, and that's why they like smoking. So. For myself, I was hoping that we'd continue non-smoking, give it a longer time frame, but that was it was the financial situation, so we switched back.
I noticed when we paired back that our revenue started increasing back up again. We had a lot more clientele coming back to the casino that we did lose, because the difference between us and like some other casinos, we have a casino that's 45 minutes away from here, and gamblers, they have no problem driving 45 minutes to go to Rolling Hills to play because they can smoke there. So we did see that. We did see an increase in revenue and an increase of head counts and stuff like that right after we changed back.
Going back, or dialing back on the smoke-free policy to the 70-30 was actually pretty well received by everybody I spoke to. I mean, we did get some negative feedback from non-smoking, and from people I met out in the community that were non-smokers, I did hear some negative feedback, like mostly concern for employees, or maybe that they'd be less likely to come down, but in reality, those were the people that weren't coming down here anyway. In regards to that transition period, from a facilities perspective, you know, we do incur extra maintenance fees and whatnot by going back to smoking. So now, order of magnitude of filters that have to be changed and maintenance on environmental equipment and HVAC does go up. So that did affect our budget. In that respect, it was not necessarily enough to offset the positive that we got from going back to smoking, which by all means was it was a business decision that had to be made at the time.
It didn't really bother me too much with the non-smoking or going back to smoking, except for the smoke itself. Because as a smoker, I mean, I didn't smoke. I try not to smoke in crowds due to, you know, not everybody smokes. So that's just my own thing. So it didn't really bother me one way or the other.
Two sides, actually. As a team member, I was bummed because I really enjoyed the non-smoking atmosphere. But as a management side, I knew our numbers were down, and I had talked to some guests, and they said once they get out to the smoking areas, which, you know, we had really nice smoking areas, they decided to go home instead of come back in and get on their machine, or they got up from their machines, their favorite machines, and someone had already sat down there, and so they would just go home. So I did speak to a few people about that, but I knew it needed to be done. We needed to go back.
It's possible when we implemented it, if we had implemented it probably a year later, it might have been a little different financially. Because we were coming out of the recession. It took a few years for things to come back, but I know that all the casinos, all their profits have been going up, and it's started about the year after we did this, so we didn't give it a fair shot, and that's just my opinion.
Personally, yes, I did, and I spent less time on the floor than I did in that almost a year that we were non-smoking. I do know that we tried to do more things like ventilation-wise in the non-smoking area, the doors, the glass doors, the 2 double doors, to eliminate the smell.
We just had a few customers, people I know who come, that were disappointed that we had went back to smoking. And like I say, now it's kind of a moot point, so no one really brings it up or whatnot. But you know, myself, like I say, we made changes when we did that for air quality and different doors to block smoke from areas and whatnot. And then for myself, I see a big difference when we did go back to smoking. It wasn't as bad as it was. So our equipment upgrades made a big difference.
The feedback that I got from other members, it wasn't like they weren't happy, they weren't sad. I mean, it was kind of it was all mixed, because the thing about our casino is it supports 90% of our tribal members, because I mean that's the only income that they have. And so they see when that's going down, their checks are going down, their per capita is going down, and that they needed to do something to get that revenue back up. And so people's families and stuff weren't so affected.
The members themselves, they were split, I think. Some thought it was a good idea, some thought it was a bad idea, but if you're coming at it from a business point of view, I think that it was a bad idea in general, the way it happened, because we were losing money, and it was due to that.
I think the current ventilation systems are good for the facility if we didn't have smoking. I don't think there is a ventilation system that I've ever seen that would ever mitigate smoke. Smoke is not something that's mitigated unless it's non-existent. It's just the way smoke is. You know, I don't care what people say. I mean, if you go outside and someone's smoking, the area that they're smoking in is going to inhabit the area that you're in. And you go inside, it's just going to make that space that much more inhabited by that smoke. So to me, if no one's proven it to me yet, I don't think there's a ventilation system that would mitigate the smoke 100%.
Our ventilation system is substandard compared to what we need to be at. I think if we ever do move to a different casino and stuff like that, I think that should be like the #1 priority that you start with, and build from there, build your ventilation system around the casino that you're going to be building. As it sits now, we've added add-ons and add-ons and add-ons where it was never up to that level where it should have been.
I would say modern technology can help mitigate some of the harmful effects, but I doubt there's anything that is affordable from the standpoint of a business perspective that would completely remove all of the harmful effects from smoking. That's a tough question to answer. At the end of the day, yeah, we noticed an impact against the business from an operations and maintenance, just from cleaning stuff that the smoke comes back or brings with it. At the other side of that coin, though, is that we can afford to do that work because now we've got paying patrons on the floor. So.
I think the current ventilation system that we have could be better. I've visited a lot of casinos like Benchmarking in Vegas, and I don't tend to smell the smoke as much as I do here, but I do know we're a smaller property than those larger ones. So I think ventilation system could be better, and it's important.
I think it's important to keep us aware of what the impacts are. You know, as we move forward, we're looking at building a new facility on I-5, and having that education behind us is going to help us design the new facility that much better, to design space that is completely segregated from the smoke. We still will probably design smoking area, but it would definitely not be a part of that building that the non-smoking would be in. Because that choice for those smokers, we would still leave available to them. But we would not want to impact our non-smoking clientele at the same time.
I think it's very important that we monitor our air quality just to make sure that our equipment is maintaining and doing what it's supposed to be doing.
I think it's important to monitor it, but at the same time, if it's not going to make a difference, are we wasting our time? You know, if we're not going non-smoking, are we just spinning our wheels? Or is it something we can use if we ever do move to a different spot or something like that, or expand again, that we can build to where the air quality stays at that lower level with that ventilation system like we talked about earlier?
Maintaining a monitoring program is probably a good idea. I can't see anything bad that could come out of it, and there's all sorts of good, even knowing just what's going on with the environmental on your floor, whether it's particulate in the air or pollutants in the air. That you can't go wrong knowing that information. From a historical standpoint, I think it's a good idea to do it because we may be going on smoking again someday down the road, whether it's via a law that gets passed or something else, but I think having that historical data so that we can make a good decision when the time comes is helpful for sure.
I think it's really important to monitor the air quality for our guests and for the non-smoking section so that the smell and the smoke doesn't go into that section. So I think it's very important.
You know, depending on the time of the day, the smoke is going to be less or more. So no matter what, you're going to smell some form of smoke because, like I spoke earlier about that issue, is that smoke is very intrusive. So if one person is smoking in a building, you're going to smell it somehow. So the fact that there's less smoking going on during the day probably be less impactful, but during the evening it increases and it's definitely higher levels of smoke, secondhand smoke.
I would hope that it was clean air and not hazy, that you wouldn't see that people were smoking.
Really good. I think the air quality in a new casino should be good, and with our plans to expand to the I-5 property, I think that should be one of the top priorities is our ventilation system.
Desirable level for me inside of any casino is that I don't feel like I can see it and smell it at the same time. There's facilities I've been in and I literally had a hard time seeing across parts of certain rooms in that facility because the smoke was so heavy. And for me, I understand when I go into a casino that there's going to be smoke. Generally, I understand that. But I don't want to see it. Then it's even worse for me. I do. Yeah. I mean, I think that understanding what that level is and what the benchmark for that level is something that still needs to be established, you know, somehow, so that the public is more educated on that as well. And I think everybody should know what the levels are, no matter where they go.
I think the team members need to know. The patrons, I think, already know. I think the team members also already know with the way it is. Everybody expects to walk inside a casino and have a smoky. Everyone I've been to in Vegas, you know, Reno, still smell the cigarette smoke. It might not be as harmful or toxic as certain places, but it's still present. People know that you're going to a place that smoking's allowed. I think they have that automatic intuition of how it's going to be.
I do think that team members and guests need to know that. I think we're the last smoking place in Shasta County. I don't think people can smoke in restaurants or other public places, correct? So I think it's important that they know.
In order to balance that issue, it's going to be part of, you know, continuing to educate ourselves on the smoking, non-smoking issue. And as we move forward and develop a new facility, like which we're planning currently, that we're able to design that facility to accommodate the education that we have about the smoking issue. We know things now that we didn't know. So I think that we can be smarter with how we design things in the future. But I also don't believe in telling everybody that because I don't like smoking, that they have to stop smoking too. I'm not that kind of person. I believe in people have rights to do whatever they want to do as long as it's legal. And the fact that smoking is legal, I'm not going to tell somebody they shouldn't smoke, because that's not my right to do that. They have a right to do whatever they want with themselves. But working in that kind of environment, I want to protect the staff and myself as much as possible. So I would design that facility to ensure that that was taken care of as best possible.
I think we knew that secondhand smoke has always been told is bad for you. And so that's why I'm glad that we've implemented with the new equipment, new air exchange equipment, that we've lowered the smoke in the air or particles or whatever may be there, because we do value our employees' health and our members' health who also work here. And it's a conflicting thing. I don't know where the exact tipping point is, but financially we have to look out for our tribe and our tribal members too, because that pays for all our education, health care, housing. And so that part is very important, but also to take care of our employees.
That's a hard one to answer. I mean, because when you have people that are unemployed and their only income is the per capita, and if it starts affecting their families, so we have to start thinking about, because they're all really all one big family here, and so it's my cousins and my brothers and sisters or nephews or nieces that are losing money because we're worried about the health value of where we're at. But I think, so you have, it's a double-edged sword, because you don't want your team members getting sick, you don't want your patrons getting sick, but you also want to support the tribe, and so you have to. It's a balancing act all the way around on how you can figure this out. And honestly, I do not have the answer on how to figure that one out. That's a hard one, because you're darned if you do and you're darned if you don't. So it goes back and forth.
I think that there's a conflict there due to the employees that back the company, that support the company, that that their health is in danger, it's per se, by breathing the smoke. And in order to get people to be for the tribe and work for them, as smoking, it's hard to say. If you're looking at it from business, and if you're looking at it from the employees, I think there's a big conflict, because if you don't want people to get sick from the secondhand smoke, you don't want people to, but you also have a business to run.
I know that Wind River is a big supporter of relationships over profits. So I think initially they will do what's best for the team members and our guests. I think, gosh, it's a hard question to answer. I know that the economic development of the tribe is important also, but they do care about relationships. So I know maybe going forward with the new property, they'll do a little bit more to make sure that we stay healthy, I think. That's so hard. I don't know. Because I know that they both are probably equal, our health and our economic growth. But they kind of conflict. I don't have a good answer for that. Sorry.
The advice would be that you would have to take into account that there would be an impact to the overall revenue stream, for a period of time, and we'd have to determine what would be an acceptable period of time for that to take place before they decided to do anything different than keeping it non-smoking. They would have to understand there will be an impact, because we've already experienced that.
Myself personally, I would love to see 100% non-smoking. I just think it's a cleaner environment, less cleaning for housekeeping, and less work for the ventilation systems and the other equipment. And like I said, if it was the same for all casinos, it wouldn't be a big issue. I'm sure everyone would go to it, rather than to have an economic disadvantage if you had one close by who allowed smoking and then the other one was non-smoking.
Don't do it yet. I think we jumped the gun. I think as long as there's other casinos that have smoking, I think that we will be actually shooting ourselves in the foot. We were too proactive on it. We were too ahead of the time. There will be a time that we will all have to go non-smoking, and I think when that time comes, we should take that leap at that point. I would love to see it go non-smoking, but at the same time, the revenue doesn't show that it works at this point.
I believe if we were to go down this road again, we would need to engage the community a little bit more. One of the things that helped us lead to the decision in the first place to go to non-smoking was we had a lot of noise out in the community of people saying, hey, we'd love to come down there. We'd go more if it was non-smoking, or I'd bring my family, but they're allergic to cigarette smoke. And at the end of the day, those people never did show up. Once we went non-smoking, we saw almost none of those people that said they were going to come show up. So we had no support in the community for it. And the people that do support this business the most would be the smokers, which is apparent. And it would be foolish to make a change like that without addressing the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is going to have to be what's available around you. If you're going to be the first person to do it, like we were, and you have a facility that's just a few miles down the road that isn't, then odds are it's probably not going to work out very well. So that's going to have to be looked at by anybody that's getting ready to do it again. If we were to do it again, I think it would have to be something that's done area-wide. I don't think as a business we could just do it by ourselves, knowing that there's 3 or 4 other casinos around here that people could drive to where they can smoke.
I don't think that it should go 100% smoke-free. Because there's both sides, you know, there's smokers and then there's non-smokers, and I think there's an equal, I don't know, equal respect there. I mean, as far as, you know, you want to accommodate both sides, and in accommodating one side with the non-smokers, you will also lose the revenue. Because, you know, a lot of people think that gambling, smoking, drinking, they all go hand in hand. And some of them will go where they're comfortable and they have all of that. So I don't think that it should go, you know, 100%, because it'll lose money.
It's tough with the gaming industry to go, if they consider going non-smoking again, because we did everything right. We had campaigns, we rolled out commercials, and we made a big deal about it. So we let people know, and people were excited, but our gamers are definitely have proven that they're smokers. So I'm not quite sure what we could do differently except make it easier for them to have a cigarette, I guess, or an e-cigarette, or whatever, a pipe, whatever that they choose. I don't know, because the guests really said they didn't want to come back to their machine or their table or the restaurant when they left to have their smoke break. So I'm not quite sure what they should consider.
Just to, you know, ensure that when we're designing the future, for the future, and as we design for the future, that we keep in mind how we can mitigate the smoke issue. You know, how can we do that the best way possible, and still make the customer that wants to smoke feel like they're welcome as well. The considerations for moving to more non-smoking areas is, how is that going to enhance and at the same time support your overall goals? moving forward. So for instance, I would look at every non-essential gaming area and make that non-smoking right off the bat. Every area that had no gaming, I would start there, make it non-smoking. There's no reason that those areas are smoking whatsoever. Your hotels, your restaurants, your entertainment facilities, anything like that that has no gaming, then you need to look at your gaming area and say, how do I reduce the gaming space, gaming smoking space as much as I can before I start impacting the bottom line? And then evaluate that and start chipping away at it. Take a little bit more if you can. And at some point, there's going to be a tipping point. You're going to have to say, okay, that's about as acceptable as I can be without impacting the tribe's needs.
See, that reverts right back to if you have a casinos close by who allow smoking, if you're going to lose your part of your customer base who would go somewhere else rather than to come to your casino, which is 100% smoke-free. So you'd have to provide some areas somewhere outside or different areas for people. And that's the only thing I could really think of that you'd have to do if you went 100%.
Well, I think you can increase your non-smoking gaming area, but just keep your smoking gaming area the same size. Don't cut one for the other. I mean, you can have a 50% non-smoking, 50% smoking. It's balancing out your games and your mix on the floor and all that type of stuff to draw your guests to those areas. It's more planning. You know, it's not just jumping in there, and it's not something that you could do overnight. It's changing the whole floor layout to where you have certain games in certain areas or table games in certain areas so people can go to the non-smoking area and the smoking area. But it's hard for casinos because usually they start with a small structure and they jam it all in there. Then they say, okay, we're going to do 10% non-smoking. Well, 10% doesn't cover it. You know, a 50-50 mix would be amazing, but it's hard when unless you build it that way. You can't just add on to it and expand it out that way.
Well, health and welfare for your team members is always a huge factor in that. If you can minimize it and not impact your business negatively, or only to a point where you feel comfortable, then obviously it's a really good idea to always push towards the safer side for your team members and for your patrons. At the end of the day, going there requires a lot of communication within the organization, a lot of communication within the leadership and the tribal leadership, and getting really honest with yourself about what the impacts to your business are going to be. And because if you don't do those things, odds are you're not going to have a successful venture.
The self-insurance issue, which is very new for us, we're about 5 years into ours. It's hard for me to say because we haven't had enough time to evaluate that, and ours has been extremely positive. You got to remember too, most gaming facilities have a young workforce. So most gaming facilities don't have a lot of issues with their health and the impacts of their insurance. I think that as people get older, they have more issues in health just overall. But we've had a really successful self-insurance model at this point, and we have a really intense health and wellness program in place as well that has been contributing to that. So that's a hard one for me right now because I don't think we've had time to evaluate it. I wouldn't want to guess that one. I don't know. And I'm really not sure what the workforce is either. I know that with our self-insurance model, that over the last 5 years, our premiums have went down drastically. We've actually been able to offer more benefits to our team members than we have before for a lot less money. We've reduced our deductibles by over 150% in the past 3 years. So it's hard to tell how the smoking impacts that at this point because I think it's too new for us. I think that'd be a great study, and there might be studies out there that I haven't seen, but so far we've only seen positive impacts by going to self-insurance and not anything negative. I really don't, because we still have a really high number of non-smoking customers that come in, and they tell me the same thing I tell people. When I go to a gaming facility, I expect it. Do I enjoy it when I go to a gaming facility and there's a majority of it that has non-smoking? I enjoy it that much more, but I expect it, and maybe that's something that needs to change. People need to be able to expect the alternative, which is that there's less smoking. But I think that the industry just hasn't got there yet. I think it's working towards that, and I think that the younger crowd is expecting more of that. It's just they're not there yet. And the younger crowd isn't our customer, so that makes it tough. I think just overall, the issue of smoking and non-smoking, it's still very controversial. But I think there's a solution to that, is that people educate themselves and that they start thinking about the future and start designing and implementing incentives for the smoker and the non-smoker, for the smoker mostly, to still want to come and enjoy themselves. And I think that is designing the space appropriately. But you're going to have to segregate that space if you want to get rid of that impact.
Personally, I hope someday we are 100%. And if the government keeps taxing everybody, pretty soon they'll all quit and we won't have to worry about it.
It was a great shot. I think we did a good job. We tried it. We went almost a year, and I think in the future, if we ever do go again, I think it will happen. But I just think we were just, like I said, we were too ahead of the time for the rest of the casinos. Once everybody goes, everybody will follow suit. But right now, we just weren't there yet.
In a perfect world, I wish people didn't smoke, but that's my personal opinion.